I am here with another layout process video as part of the design team over at the Counterfeit Kit challenge. Our challenge for this layout is to make it messy, which is easy for me to do, but if it's not easy for you to do, I have some tips for you. Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty, where I create with paper and photos in artful ways. So I've got Miss Willow with me here today, and you'll see even with a cat on my desk that I can do a mixed media layout and not worry too much about the mess. I am working out of my travel album from 2023, and I'm working on these particular photos. Because I am making multiple layouts for this trip for multiple albums, you can see in a previous video, I've already told this story in a very different way. So if you want to check that out, I will link you up. I have got my Counterfeit Kit here, and if you don't know anything about that, all the information about the Counterfeit Kit Challenge is down below. Totally free group where we build our kits and then get inspired to use them for scrapbooking. All right, I have pulled out a few pieces of paper that I think could work as a basis for this layout to hold all that mixed media. And as I'm shuffling through these, I decide the wood grain's not the right feel for this cathedral story. And I'm sorting through trying to figure out what I do want. I like this old-fashioned text print, but it is too flimsy. And as I'm moving things around, I realize I have a beautiful print right there that is plenty thick that will hold up to the mixed media. All right, since this photo has a white border, I'm going to go ahead and matte my focal photo as well. I debate back and forth about how I want to matte it and what I want to do. I decide I want to add some white to go with the other photo, and this paper also has some text on it, so I think that lends itself a little bit to what I've got going on with the background paper as well. You're not going to see much of it. It just adds a little bit of character to that matte. I am going to ink everything with my new Concord and Ninth black ink, and I'm finding I really like this hybrid ink pad for inking the edges of things. The soft foam pad makes it really easy to press up against the edge and easy physically to ink it, and also the hybrid formulation dries fairly quickly. I do set it off to the side on some plastic just in case, because I'm so used to inked edges causing messes. But this ink is drying in a reasonable amount of time. All right, let's move on to what we would consider the very messy part of this mixed media background. And I'm going to be using some gesso, and I pulled out my distress crayons, and I'm going to focus on blues because that's what we've got in the photo. And then I'm going to add some lunar paste through this star stencil. I am using gesso, and if you don't know, gesso is a product that's made to prep canvases for painters. It fills in the pores so that when painters are applying their paint, they don't need to use as much paint. And gesso is generally white, although you can find black and white or black and clear gesso as well. My gesso is fairly thin, and there are different thicknesses of gesso out there, so it's just depends on what you appreciate using. I like it to be thin because I can pour it, and that helps reduce the mess, as you'll see in a minute. I am outlining where my photos will go so that I don't gesso the whole entire paper, because that just uses product that's going to get hidden and it takes longer to dry. So I'm reducing my time load here by outlining this area of photos. And as you can see, Miss Willow wants to know what I'm doing with the gesso jar, and I just help her stay out of the way as I work on. So you can see I can pour the gesso straight on, so there's no container that I have to worry about cleaning. I have this silicone brush, which is a fantastic tool that doesn't need much cleaning. If you're using a brush with bristles, that's going to require a lot of washing out at the sink. So having a good tool will make a big difference. You can also do this with like a plastic palette knife or a credit card, old credit card, something along those lines, instead of buying something specialty. I just really like the softness of the silicone brush, and that's why I use it. Let's see, what's next? Okay, cleaning up. I screw on my lid, and then I just have to wipe off the edge of my brush. That's it. That's the whole cleanup for this part. All right, I am going to use my heat tool to help speed up the drying, and that's how I get through mixed media. Sometimes I will do it ahead of time and set it aside to dry overnight. But before I bought this heat tool, I didn't do as much mixed media because this tool really does speed up things, so I can get through a mixed media session during a cat nap, as Willow's still off to the side over there, and she's with me for most of this process. Moving on, wet mediums will warp your paper, so you saw me using my fingers to kind of curl the paper in the opposite direction of the way it warped, much like you would curl a curling ribbon. Only with paper, we're doing it in the opposite direction to actually uncurl it, and it's not perfect, but it's way better. I just wanted to talk a minute about why I use gesso. It's for two reasons. One is that it's going to seal up the pores of the paper, so when I add more wet medium on top, it's going to protect the paper from further warping and such. And the whiteness of the gesso is going to help these colors show up better. So those are the reasons why I like to use gesso. All right, next step once this is dry is to add some color. I did want to go with blues because that's in the photo, but I find that I really like watercolory backgrounds. Pardon me. Watercolory backgrounds that have more depth of color to them. And I'm not really good at that yet, and I'm trying. So I will add in my base blue color. I will come in with these other crayons and tuck in more of that color around. And then I'm bringing in some yellow, which I know through color theory will mix with the blue some and bring in some green tones. I don't want to mix them too much because I'm not focusing on green on this layout, but as you'll see later, because I do get some of those green tones, I will get some of my embellishments going on in a little bit of greens. All right, and this is just a matter of scribbling on these crayons. So having a nice medium to work with, like these Distress watercolor crayons, makes things easy. When I'm watercoloring, I generally don't use water brushes, but this kind of loosey-goosey style of watercoloring is great for water brushes. And as you can see, I'm just swooshing this around and I'm avoiding mixing those two colors at this point. I'm kind of tapping the brush on the side of the bristles to try and get more splotches and less straight lines. I squeeze out some extra water to water some areas down, try and get a little bit of splatter. It's actually not splattering very well, so I mostly end up tapping the side of the brush, which is good because spatter makes more mess than just tapping the edge of the brush. So one big detail about what I'm doing with my mixed media is I'm not going off the edge of my paper, which means you would get stuff on your desk, so I'm avoiding having to clean up my desk. As you can see, Miss Willow wants to help me with the painting. She wants to chase my little bristles. But as I start working in this yellow, I will start mixing a little bit of it here and there. All right, I just squeeze out extra water from my brush, and that cleans the brush enough to set it aside. I don't even have to do anything to it. I do wipe up that water puddle off my little palette with a rag, and I'm done cleaning that. All right, stencil paste, however, is definitely messier than other things. I pointed out that I can still kind of see my pencil line underneath my paint, but eventually if you add enough paint and mediums, that will disappear. So I'm just trying to keep my stencil paste, again, I'm not going off the edge of my paper so that I don't have to clean my desk. And I'm just going to keep it in 3 areas, and I try to go with a big, medium, and little size of different areas based on design principles. And I've got that going on. And then I realized I wanted to use this area of the layout for my journaling. So I thought I would remove some of those stars. And of course, it's smeared. So I took that as an opportunity to embellish because I could have kept wiping it and cleaning it and then because that gesso seals the pores of the paper, you can wipe things off of it better. But I would have to have redone the watercoloring and so on. But I kind of liked what was happening with the smeared gold lunar paste, so I went with it and used that as an opportunity to embellish. So I did have to take my stencil to the sink and wash it, and I've been using this particular product, which is a soap-infused scrubber. And as I open it and show it to you, you can see that the scrubber part is embedded throughout the soap. But it is really nice at gently, because it's a plastic mesh scrubber, of gently scraping off any partially dried paste from the stencil. If it's fully dried, you'll have a hard time, but if it's still slightly moist, then you can scrub it off easily. So again, having good products and tools helps. So while the paste is drying on my project, I clean up my stencil and I add foam strips to the back of my photos. The lunar paste does dry pretty quickly, but I still overestimated it just a bit. I did get some specks of that paste on my photo because I set my photo upside down to add foam tape to it before my stars were 100% dry. So yes, things do happen. I am fixing it by cleaning up as much as I can, and then I covered that up with a Sharpie. On this very black portion of the photo, it was showing up more starkly than it was on the other portion, so I just focused my fix on that area, and you'll see I have a better idea that comes up later. In the meantime, I am working on my title. I have gold alphas in my kit this month, and that goes well with the gold embellishing or with the gold paste that I'm using. I wanted to add a second font to my title, but I didn't include anything like that in my kit this month. So I went to my stash. Just because you build a kit doesn't mean you can't go pull extra things if you need them. So I picked this little round font. I liked the font itself more than the roundness, so that finishes up my title. But I'm feeling like it's not standing out enough, and I think I want to frame it. And the embellishment packs that I have, these are the Vicky Booten new collaboration with 49 a Market, has lots and lots of embellishments, and I know there's some frames in there, so I dig through and I try to find some things. As I was working, I found a piece that could work to cover up my boo-boo from earlier, so we'll get more to that. I did find a whole bunch of frames, even some of the pieces that are technically garbage from holding together the other chipboard pieces could be used as a frame. I sort through these and I look at them, and it takes me a minute to decide on which one I want to use, but I settle on this one, which is, I like the color balance better, and it has some detail on there that I think fits the style of the layout better. With my title solidified, I move on to doing some embellishing. When I have that little tag across my photos, it fits right over both areas of mistake. If I hadn't had a piece like that, the way I overlap my photos also kind of aligned up to make that Sharpie that I corrected the mistake with way less noticeable, because your eye is kind of skipping over that part of the photo and moving on to other parts of that photo. So sometimes just the way you arrange embellishments or photos or overlapping things can help draw attention away from a problem area. All right, I'm not going to go over all of the details of this embellishing. I do my typical clustering with at least 3 items of embellishing. I try to add similar items to each area, like these postage stamps. And again, this is where I brought in the green. Those postage stamps I added to my kit were definitely a fun element that I had found at a local store. And they're real postage stamps, real vintage postage stamps. So I thought that was really fun. So yeah, I try to add similar elements to each area, make sure I'm pulling in colors to each area. I had this leftover thread from sewing felt stars earlier in the month, and if you haven't seen that video, I will link you up to that as well. So I had this leftover thread that I'm going to make messy thread nests. And, it used to be kind of hard for me to do embellishing that didn't necessarily go with the story. I mean, there's no reason why I would use a postage stamp on a layout about cathedral music or this messy thread thing. But I'm finding that as I do this stuff more and more, I can kind of relax my ideas a little bit of things that I can fit on layouts. Like a little bit later, I put a bird and a few little greenery leafy pieces. And again, we were walking in the city and we went into this fancy cathedral. It had nothing to do with birds or green leafy things. But I'm finding that through practice, I can expand my ideas of what I think works. All right, I am back to this central zone of this little tag that's covering up my boo-boos. I put a felt star underneath that. I had intended to sew all of these felt stars into puffy felt stars like I did earlier, but having pre-cut all these stars, I figured why not just use it as is, and it helps with that arrow to draw a little more focus to my daughter in that photo and her expression, which is the whole point of this story. We walked into this cathedral, and as soon as we did, the organ music started blasting from above us, and the sound was amazing. So we don't go to cathedrals. So this was a new experience for her, and she was just kind of in awe of the beauty of everything. All right, there's not much more to embellishing this layout. I did want to add a few details to this area. And since I added them to that area, I'm going to try and tie some of that in with the other areas. And then I've got my journaling on there, and I call this layout complete. I hope I gave you some good tips and tricks on how to make mixed media less messy and less scary, because believe me, I did not want to clean up messes before I started doing mixed media, and I've learned how to make it work for me. I hope you can learn how to make it work for you, because it can be beautiful and fun. That is it for this time. Until I am back with you next time, I hope you have an artful day.